Hello, I'm back in Carter and Ashley's bathroom. So today we talked to David Boss and Gert. Yeah. I found it very weird, I guess, that Dr. Bose only gave us the one reading on religion, and he talked about a lot more. I feel like he talked more about Dutch giving politically correct answers, even if they don't feel that way, more so than Gert, who wrote an article on it. Um, and so, based on the article Gert gave us and Bose's presentation, I created a question that I underlined saying, do the Dutch give politically correct answers because they think their own views are wrong? Or because they don't want to be rejected by other Dutch people? That's something we didn't really discuss. In social theory, I believe it was Durkheim who talked about that. Even if your own views go against the grain of what the majority of society thinks or what is believed they should think, you will act accordingly to the societal pressures because you want to fit in, not necessarily because you actually think yourself to be wrong or something like that. And then I also thought maybe they do it to separate themselves from Muslims because that whole xenophobia is very strong in the Dutch community. And so, even though they don't think gay people being together is right or anything like that, they give the politically correct answer because they know it puts them in contention with Muslims who, from what I can tell, a lot of Dutch have negative feelings towards. So, yeah. And then as far as Gert, he talked about a lot of things. Not so much directly relating to the article we read, which was about contentions with the gay community in current times, which he talked about a little bit near the end. But I especially found intriguing and related to my research project. He talked about queer spaces online versus physical LGBT plus spaces. He talked about how a lot of bars, gay bars, lesbian bars, have been shut down because there just isn't a need for them anymore because of the online space. And so I think I'm going to somehow iterate that into my research and look at how the queer people who go to the bar that Bear Silver mentioned, like why they do that versus why a lot of pansexuals my age and whatnot look towards the online and what is appealing to that. Uh, yeah, those are my thoughts today. David Robinson's talked to us about uh, the gay and lesbian movement here in Amsterdam with the COC and gaining rights within the government was very intriguing. Um, I think it's quite different than America's own development in the lesbian and gay rights, just because they did begin to use lesbian and gay rights and the tolerance of it as a tactic to demonize Muslim people and ostracize them from Dutch society, whereas it's more of in the United States his grounding in religious background, and that's why we can't really get anything through and stuff about the Constitution, blah blah blah. But what I thought was the most standout point to me was when he talked about the fact that there isn't much queer or trans history when it comes to gaining rights. And I thought, I wonder why that is. And I think that's because the Netherlands are very liberal, and so they see gaining rights and gaining freedom through existing systems of power, whereas queer existence challenges systems of oppression like gender binaries at all, and gays kind of help the binary in a sense because in having gays you have heterosexuals, that whole kind of dichotomy. And so giving queers rights just kind of doesn't fit into that mix, I suppose. And so that's another way where you see Dutch activism and American activism becoming separating as if they were ever one. They probably weren't, but they kind of separate because a lot of protest movements now in the United States are about eliminating the current system, such as with Black Lives Matters, which did start as a queer movement, which I think is very important to state. Um, and a lot of feminist movements, feminist writers, whereas in the Netherlands, they don't seem to have a problem with the existing powers. At least not from what I've heard from any of the speakers. So when going to Brussels, I was super impressed by the LGBTI intergroup as they talked about all the kind of legislative and political power changes they've been attempting to make, not only in the EU, but kind of worldwide, as they talked about, Russia and Nigeria and that sort of thing. But then experiencing the city itself, I don't know if they've made a lot of social change. And then you have to think what matters more, the legislative and political change or the social change? Coming to Europe in a place that is known to be more sexually free than the United States, I didn't expect to be catcalled as much as I have been. I can name at least 5 times where men have made outward remarks to me, and a couple of times where they've gotten physical with me. And there have been a lot of scary things that happened to me in the US, but not on such a frequent basis. And so I just have to wonder, how do you affect social change in that way? Is it political campaigns? Is it education? How can we create a safer place for everyone? That's something I've been struggling a lot with lately. I love the sounds of drunk people. Definitely takes away the somber effect of this video. But for real, how do you affect social change? Is it protests? Is it campaigns? Is it just talking to people? I'm genuinely interested. Today we were walking down the street and there was plenty of room on either side of me, but this guy came up behind me and grabbed me by my shoulders and physically moved me so that he could get by. Why did he think that was okay? It reminds me a lot of Ta-Nehisi Coates in Between the World and Me when he takes his son to go see Howl's Moving Castle, a great film, by the way. Everyone should go see it. And a white lady yells at and then physically moves his son, and he gets confrontational with her because that's his son. He should have his own autonomy. But he realizes that's not how it's socially accepted to be, and because of the racial hierarchy, all white people see a claim to his and his son's bodies. I guess the same is true with women, but that doesn't mean it is okay. And in those situations, I wonder what the right way to react is. If I got angry and up in that guy's face, he'd be like, I didn't do anything, because moving women, physically interrupting their space isn't seen as a bad thing. It's a norm. When I get catcalled, do I flick them off? Do I shout things at them? Do I catcall them back? There's so many things I have to think about. Like, if I respond, am I in a large enough group where he won't come back and confront me? Will it actually make him uncomfortable? Will it make him realize what he did was wrong? Does he know that it's wrong? Tonight I'm going out again with friends. Like always, I will not be able to enjoy it freely. I'll always have to think about how men will treat me or react to my state of being. And I just wish that wasn't the case. Filming in nature. So last night I went out to a gay club and it was a really fun time. It was great to know that all the guys in there weren't interested in just like touching me and having sex. So I felt very respected and safe in that space. At one point, Beyonce's Girls Run the World came on, and everybody was like pointing at Rachel and I because we were pretty much the only girls in there. And it was really great. And then we stepped out of the club and immediately started getting catcalled, and that was not a fun time. And then I talked to my boyfriend about it, and he was upset for me. He was like, I wish I could have been there. And I was like, well, if you were there, it wouldn't have happened because they would have seen me as your property. He's like, what can I do about it? And I said, just starting conversations with your male friends about how to handle those things and to not do it, frankly. And so that kind of gave me an idea as to how we can implement social change. We also went to the Anne Frank house, which was a sombering experience. And in the last room, it was a video of how Anne Frank touched everybody's lives. And they were like, we do this, we see this because we want to think it can't happen again, but it can. And so that kind of made me feel like even though we have all these histories, like the lesbian and gay history that Voss was telling us about, and the genocides of millions of Jews, there are still, even though we've seemingly overcome those aspects, things like that can still happen. And so it's very important for us to find ways to make sure that these things don't happen, like telling the men in our lives how they can help us, finding safe spaces for women, creating safe spaces for women and for queer people, for everybody, really. So I really want to work on that, figuring out how to create these safe spaces. Hopefully in my documentary I can explore those kinds of paths. But yeah, I can't wait for week 3.